make sure y'all all check out the YouTube Elevation Blueprint, which is your go-to book if you want to learn how to start a successful YouTube channel and monetize your content. Click the link in the bio to get your copy today. Now, first of all, let's get this straight. Barry White isn't an underrated artist at all. So let's just get that right out the way. But I just want to highlight him anyway because he's just great. You know what I'm saying? Let me say that I do feel that when it comes to the conversation of great singers and talented musicians, his name don't get mentioned enough with the Stevie Wonders, the Marvin Gayes, the Smokey Robinsons, and so on. He doesn't get mentioned enough, in my opinion. But, out of all the great R&B, baritone, deep bass singers, Isaac Hayes, Lou Rawls, Larry Graham, Melvin Williams from the Temptations, Blue Lovett from the Manhattans, Michael McCary from Boyz II Men, and there's many more. But none of them can touch the maestro, Barry White. Now, the women do mention him a lot. They mention him, in that sex symbol category. He was a sex symbol before Teddy P. He had women throwing drawers and panties on stage. Barry said women were throwing room keys, house keys on stage, and even bought him a car. Wow. The man had over 100 nicknames: the Walrus of Love, the Godfather of the Bedroom Soul, the Undisputed Maestro of Sensual Soul Music, Dr. Love, the Guru of Love, the Catalyst of Love, the Love Buddha, the Prince of Pillow Talk, the King of Disco, and many more names. Now, look, he didn't like being called the King of Disco, though. He said that's foolish. Disco has been around since 1969, he said. He said he surfaced in 1972, and he just was there at the right time when that kind of music that was happening. But he does consider himself one of the inventors of disco music, though. Barry also said he never looked at himself as a sex symbol because of his weight. He was 6'3", over 300 pounds. So he never looked at himself as a sex symbol. But, a lot of babies were born to his music. Barry said that people used to come up to him with their kids and say that their child was conceived by whichever one of his songs. Wow. And look, not only does his music help people make babies, his music also helps sharks in aquariums mate and have babies. That's crazy. Using his music for sharks to mate. 20 gold singles, 106 gold albums, 10 platinum singles, and 41 platinum albums with over 100 million records sold worldwide. Nominated for 11 Grammy Awards, winning 2 of them at the end of his career. Songs have been sampled by him, Jay-Z, 50 Cent, Alicia Keys, Usher, P. Diddy, Mary J., Nas, and many more artists have sampled his music. An ex-gangbanger, he's from them streets. Barry was from them streets, who was determined to change his life for the better. He's a very spiritual person. I tell you what, let's get into the story, man. Let's get into Barry White's story. Now, Barry White was born on September 12th, 1944 in Galveston, Texas. And the crazy part is, on his birth certificate, his mother named Sadie Marie Carter, she put down Barry Eugene Carter, her family's name, after finding out that his father Melvin White was already married and had kids across town. So when she went back to Los Angeles, where she lived when Barry was only 4 months old, his father ended up scratching his name, scratched the Carter name out, and put his family name, which was White, on the birth certificate. So he actually had two legal names, according to Barry. His mother was pregnant with his brother Daryl when she found out that their father had a whole nother family on the other side of town. So after Texas, she went back to Los Angeles, California, and they lived in the hood in the South Central area. He grew up in Watts. His younger brother named Daryl was 2 years younger. Now, growing up in Watts, Barry said that they was dirt poor, to the point that some days they didn't even know if they were going to eat. But he did have two uncles. His two uncles, his mother's brothers, they would look out after them. Now, his mother was an actor turned piano teacher. She was originally an actress, having appeared in 3 movies before chronic arthritis put an end to her career. But, she taught Barry and his brother how to harmonize and sing when he was about 4 years old. He said one of the first songs he learned how to sing was the Christmas song called Silent Night. And, his mother loved classical music, and she used to play the piano. Like I said, she had bought a used upright piano for $50. She saved $50 from her welfare checks to get it. And she tried to teach him chords and scales, but Barry said he just couldn't get it that way. So he just learned on his own and played by ear. Barry said he never learned how to read music from the sheets. He said music is something you just gotta feel. You gotta feel the groove. So by the age of 8 years old, he started singing in church choir, which led to him becoming the church organist and part-time choir director, despite not being able to read music. That's how good he was. He also said around that age, right, his voice used to sound like Michael Jackson then, believe it or not. Now, by the time he was 10 years old, and his brother, him and his brother, man, they was running the streets at 10 years old. His brother was 8. Barry said he was fighting and defending himself from the older and bigger kids, and he joined a neighborhood gang called the Roman 20s, and then later on he joined the businessmen when they moved. This was before Bloods and Crips. In those days, you had like the Roman 20s. The gangs were Roman 20s, the businessmen, the Slausons, the Gladiators, and the Del Vikings. Barry said in an interview that in the 50s and the 60s, Southwest Los Angeles had 4 or 5 gangs. The West Side had about 11 or 12 gangs, and the first gang he was in was called the Roman 20s. And then he later on joined the hottest gang around, which was the businessmen. And really, you know what? They all formed to really fight against a racist street gang called the Spook Hunters, which was formed in Southgate, California, because the spook hunters just hated the fact that the growing African American and Latino population was getting bigger in Los Angeles. Now, the businessman gang was formed around 1946 or 1947 and was one of the biggest territorial gangs that operated in South Central at that time. And the gang earned the name the businessmen because they knew how to take care of business. You know how it go with no father in the house. You just start to look up to the older guys in the neighborhood. Now, he also grew up in the same neighborhood with soul singer Jesse Belvin. I did a story on Jesse Belvin on my channel. He grew up with Jesse Belvin, and look, they say Barry White actually played the piano on his hit song called Good Night, My Love. He was like 11 years old then or something. Wow. But the streets at the time was very dangerous and filled with a lot of crime. Barry said he saw it all. He saw it all from murders, shootings, stabbings, robberies, you name it. He said, but see, Barry's thing was he loved stealing. He would burglarize houses in broad daylight. And the crazy part is he really didn't want no money or jewelry. He wanted to steal vinyl records, LPs. He said he had the heaviest record collection in the neighborhood, albums stacked to the ceiling. He said for about 11 straight months, he couldn't go to sleep without stealing a car. He said he must have stolen about 150 to 200 cars. Wow. Plus, he had a reputation because he can really fight. Not to mention he had grew some inches, making him 6'3" at the age of 14 years old. Him and his brother Daryl were vicious on them streets. Barry said he had to tell his mom the reason why she can walk up and down the block safe because of him and Daryl's reputation in the hood. Because she wanted them to stay away from the gang life. Now, here comes the crazy part, right? Now, also around that age of 14 years old, his voice had changed overnight. Now, Barry said his voice before was a regular high school teen voice. But one morning, when he woke up and he went to go speak to his mother, and this deep bass voice came out that scared him and his mother to death. He said his chest rattled with vibrations and his mother was just staring at him. And he was staring at her, and the next thing he knew, his mother started smiling and crying at the same time. She said, my son's a man now. Then he said the very next day, his facial hair started growing. He said for about 30 days, he felt like a freak. Him and his friends, they was all freaked out about the voice change. But what he had noticed is the girls loved it though. The girls loved the voice change. Even back then at a young age, the women loved Barry White. To the point that he started counseling and giving advice to couples on their relationships. Wow, at 14 years old. So now, in his teens, but he's still in trouble, man. He was always in trouble with the law, burglary, stealing cars, always fighting, shootouts, smoking weed, drinking, and everything. Plus, he was a dedicated gang member to his gang. And by the time he was 16 years old, him and his childhood sweetheart named Betty Smith, they done had 2 kids already. But Barry said when him and Betty broke up, they had broke up for something. After he saw her talking to another guy, it just made him worse. He became very mean in the streets. And he ended up doing some time. And that's when him and his friends decided to steal some Cadillac car tires, which was worth over $30,000. But, they ended up getting caught and he ended up going to jail. Now, his younger brother, Daryl, was really wild and crazy and has been going to jail since he was 8 years old. Barry said his brother Daryl was locked up every Christmas. He just loved violence and couldn't get enough of it. And Barry said it got to the point that he couldn't even go nowhere with his brother Daryl because he would just start trouble. And later on in life, he would end up doing 13 years for a bank robbery and kidnapping charge. But anyway, so at the age of 16 years old, Barry ended up serving 4 months. He did 4 months in prison in juvie for stealing tires. But it was during that time, being locked up in juvenile hall, that he decided to change his life. After listening to an Elvis Presley song called It's Now or Never. The lyrics in that song just touched him so deep, he decided to change his life and dedicate his life to music. He knew music was all he had and was the only thing that was going to change his life. He loved that more than anything. Some of his favorite artists at the time were the Penguins, who had the song Earth Angel, the Flamingos, who had the song called I Only Have Eyes for You, and one of his favorite artists at the time was Ray Charles. Now, after that, now free from juvenile hall after doing 4 months, getting a year probation, some of his friends from high school had a little singing group called the Upfronts, and they wanted Barry to be the bass singer for their group. And they recorded a song called Little Girl, and his reputation started to grow locally as the talented kid who can play instruments and sing, which led to him doing music with some other groups like the Atlantics and the Majestics. Now, by the age of 17 years old, on the day of his 17th birthday, he decided to quit school in the 12th grade with only 4 months left to graduate, which left his mom very disappointed in him. The school he was at was like a school for all bad kids, and he dropped out and he just figured he'd take his chances to make it in Hollywood, go to show business. And you know what? Mom crying. She was telling him, "Don't go to Hollywood. You don't know nobody there." But Barry's like, "I gotta go." He said he's brushing his hair in the mirror. So he told his mom, "I got to go, try to make it." And you know what? He left to go to Hollywood to make it as a musician. He actually walked from South Central to Hollywood, which was they say about 15 to 20-mile walk, and it took him about 3.5 hours. Wow. Walked all the way to Hollywood from South Central. He was determined to get out of the ghetto. And when he got to Hollywood, it just blew his mind. After seeing all the nice cars going by, everybody was dressed nice, people spoke to him. He didn't see no violence or nothing. And he loved it. And he started coming to Hollywood every day just for motivation. And he ended up seeing one of his friends who took him to a studio where he earned $100 just for doing a hand clap on a song. After that, him and his childhood sweetheart Betty got back together and they got married. They already had 2 kids together, and then they had 2 more kids. So he had 4 kids in total by the age of 21 years old. And it was a struggle trying to pursue his music career with a lot of responsibilities, because he also had to take care of his mother and his brother Daryl, who was in prison at the time. Now, Barry and his family, they were surviving off welfare checks. And, he worked a bunch of jobs to provide for the family. And he ended up running a kid toy store, which he really liked. He actually loved working at that toy store until the owner played him out of some money or something. And when his brother Daryl found out, after he got out of jail from his little stint from the first time, his brother Daryl tried to kill the owner for not paying Barry. Wow. His brother Daryl was off the chain, man. But, Barry was dealing with some hard times, though. Barry said he would make sure that his kids ate, they have eaten something, and then he would just go to the grocery store and would just act like he was shopping and would just steal and eat the cooked chicken while going up and down the aisles. But then he got a chance, though. He got a chance to work with an artist who was also his friend named Earl Nelson. He used to be part of the duo called Bob and Earl. They had a hit song back in the day called the Harlem Shuffle. But now Earl was going by the name Jackie Lee. And him and Barry, they wrote a song called The Duck, which hit number 9 on the R&B charts. And Barry became his road manager. Now, he really took that road manager job because of 2 things that was going on in LA at that time. Now, the first thing was he had went to a party with his cousin, right? Just to say hello to a lot of his old friends who were still gang members, and a rival gang had showed up while he was there, and Barry was cool with the rival gang too. Remember I told you he used to be with the Roman 20s, and now he's with the businessmen. But the 2 gangs, they had got into it, and Barry had calmed the situation down. And then he left the party. So once he left, the gangs had got back into it. They started fighting again. And a guy that Barry knew ended up getting shot. And when the cops arrived, the neighbors and the older people, they never liked them to have parties like that out there. But all they heard that night was Barry's name, because all the gang members and friends at the party was just happy to see him. They were screaming his name. So they arrested him for attempted murder. But luckily, the guy that was shot had came out of his coma after 4 days and said it wasn't Barry that shot him. He said Barry was the one that actually tried to help him and try to calm everything down, the whole situation. So Barry was lucky to get out of that situation. Now, the other thing that made him take that road manager job with Jackie Lee and leave LA was the 1965 Watts race riot. That had happened, and Barry said he had witnessed his friend singer Charles Pfizer from the Olympics. He saw his friend Charles Pfizer killed during the Watts riot. He saw the cops shoot him in the head. So Barry, he just wanted to get away from all that craziness that was going on. So he took that road manager job with Jackie Lee. Then, while on the road at the Apollo Theater, he discovered that he was a very good drum player. After trying to show the house band drummer at the Apollo how to play their song called The Duck, he couldn't get it. See, Barry, like I told y'all, he learned everything by ear as a little boy. He could emulate and copy anything just by hearing it or seeing it a couple times. So when he started playing the drums that day, he sounded so good that the other acts that were supposed to perform wanted him to play drums for them. And he ended up playing drums for about a week at the Apollo Theater. He also ended up meeting Smokey Robinson and the Marvelettes. But also around that time, being on the road and traveling, first time out of LA, California. This is the first time he was traveling on the road. He was hitting the South, and he would see how racist the Deep South was while traveling to other shows they had to do. Like one incident, he said him and Jackie Lee was in Mississippi and they had got into it with some rednecks and the cops threw them in jail. Another incident, he said, happened in Alabama when he was using the payphone. He said he was using the payphone to call home, and he called the operator on the phone baby. You know how Barry White talk. He said the next thing he knew, the sheriff pulled up and told him that he must not be from around here because the N-words in this town don't say the word baby talking to the operator. And he threatened to throw him in jail if he does it again. Wow. Now, another incident was in Louisiana when they stayed in a hotel, and Barry said he saw some Klan members all dressed up in their hoods, and it was staring at him. But nothing happened though. But that road trip just made Barry think twice about being a musician on the road from all that racism. And plus, while he was down in New Orleans, he said he saw a lady stick a knife right in a man's back and kill him. And that's when Barry said, you know what? He had enough of this. He booked the flight for the first time and headed right back home to LA. The South had messed his head up, man. But then one of his friends, when he got back home, one of his good friends named Paul Politti ended up introducing him to Bob King of Delphi Records. Bob King was mafia connected with Morris Levy. And Bob King had once signed and managed singer Ritchie Valens, who died in that terrible plane crash with Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper. The movie La Bamba was about Ritchie Valens. And Bob King also worked with Sam Cooke. He actually discovered Sam Cooke and put out the song You Send Me. But anyway, so he ended up meeting Bob King, who had a new record label called Mustang Bronco Records. And he had hired Barry to be his A&R for the label, which led to him becoming the A&R vice president of the label. And Barry started writing and arranging and producing songs for all the artists he signed to the label, like Viola Wills, Felice Taylor, and Bobby Fuller. He also had worked with a group called The Versatiles, right? Now, The Versatiles was on the label, but they ended up leaving the label because Bob King didn't believe in them. He didn't see the talent they had. And Barry, he loved The Versatiles. And he tried to convince them to stay because he thought they was a great group. He thought they should just change their name from The Versatiles. And they did change their name after leaving Barry and Bob King from The Versatiles to the Grammy Award winning R&B group The Fifth Dimension, and became successful. Wow. They had the Fifth Dimension, y'all. Let them go. But after only 18 months, the Mustang Bronco record label had shut down. The label closed. And, Barry was so disappointed about that when that happened, man. He felt his dreams was coming true and everything. And he was feeding his family, but he was just so disappointed, man, when that. He said Bob King must got the worst luck Worse luck, man, when it comes to music, because three of his biggest stars had died: Richie Valens, Sam Cooke, Bobby Fuller, who died mysteriously in his mother's Oldsmobile somehow. His death was ruled a suicide, and then later an accidental death, even though nobody really believed it. I'm gonna get to that Bobby Fuller stories too soon though, but like you said, Barry said Bob King must have had the worst luck. He had Richie Valens, Sam Cooke, Bobby Fuller. He let the group Fifth Dimension go. Another song, he had a #1 country song called Ode to Billy Joe by Bobby Gentry. He had that song first, but didn't see the vision. And a couple more acts he lost. And after the label shut down, Barry was just so heartbroken that he told himself he would never sign to a company again. But right after that, Motown came calling. They called him and tried to offer him a job on the strength of Holland, Dozier, and Holland, who thought Barry was talented. They seen Barry working in the studio. They thought he was very talented, and they had told Berry Gordy about him. But Barry, he turned down Berry Gordy too, because he said he just felt that he wouldn't get that much opportunity over there with all that talent on the roster. But then he ended up taking an offer from music publishers Aaron and Abby Schroeder, who made him a partner of their publishing company. And Barry loved them because, like I said earlier, that Elvis Presley song called It's Now or Never that made him change his life when he was in Juvenile. Aaron Schroeder is the one that wrote that song for Elvis Presley. Barry remembered that was the song that changed his life. So he got with them. So once he got with the new publishing company, he started producing, writing, and working with artists. And one day he was working with a female artist named Trixie Robinson, who brought her 3 friends with her to sing background, which was all family members. It was Dee Dee Parsons, the cousin, Linda James, and Glodine James, who were sisters, and they called themselves the Croonettes. Glodine, who will become Barry's future wife, she had them long nails way before Coco or SWV had them. But anyway, so those 3 girls wanted to be like the Supremes at the time, and they wanted Barry to write and produce for them. So he agreed, and he changed their names to Love Unlimited. Now, also around that time, him and his wife Betty ended up getting divorced because she felt he couldn't take care of his family because he was chasing this music dream of his. And right after that, him and Glodine became closer and started dating, and he got them a record deal with MCA Records, Uni MCA Records. And in 1972, they released their debut album titled From a Girl's Point of View, We Give to You, Love Unlimited. And the single called Walking in the Rain with the One I Love ended up going platinum, selling over 1 million copies, which helped push that album to platinum also. When they went on the road, Barry had a full orchestra on stage when they would perform. Now with a successful female group, Love Unlimited, Barry started looking for a male singer to sing his songs. And one day while in the studio, he just realized that he was the only male who can sing those songs he had just wrote. But the problem was, he didn't want to be a singer. He just wanted to be behind the scenes. He said what he hates about singing on stage is all the preparation. It takes up all his time in his mind when he could be just thinking about a hit record or producing another artist's hit record, or just taking it easy and kicking back. He liked to be behind the boards and do all that. He didn't want to be no singer. But his good friend Larry Nunes, who they also say was mob connected, and he used to be the silent partner with Bob King at Mustang Bronco Records when Barry was there as an A&R. But him and Barry, Larry Nunes and Barry developed a great relationship when they were together, right? But he was also the one who convinced Barry to become a solo artist. Barry didn't want to be a singer, but Larry Nunes had saved his life at this point. He was the one who put all the money up and helped him get a deal for his girl group, Love Unlimited, with MCA Records. But Larry Nunes heard Barry singing them songs in the studio. and he wanted him to sing them songs. He thought Barry sounded good. So Barry finally agreed to record the album, and once it was completed, him and Larry Noon started shopping the demo around to a bunch of labels. And believe it or not, y'all, a lot of record labels turned Barry down. They turned Barry down because of the orchestra music he had in there. And they just didn't believe the album, and they didn't believe the album had any big hits, the demo he was trying to shop around. They didn't get the album. Wow. Because the first people he brought the demo to was Russ Reagan, who signed his girl group Love Unlimited to MCA Records. But now he was at 20th Century Records. Russ Reagan was now at 20th Century Records. And Barry thought for sure he would sign him because of the relationship and success of his female group Love Unlimited. But Russ Reagan said the album was terrible. He thought Barry's demo was terrible. Wow, that's crazy. So Barry, he was hurt that he didn't sign him. But then the legendary music mogul Clive Davis came in the picture, y'all. Clive Davis, who was at CBS Records at the time, heard Barry's demo, loved it, and ended up signing him to his label somehow. But here's the crazy part. So Russ Reagan, the one that turned Barry down first, when he heard that Clive Davis was now involved, and he also heard that Elton John had heard Barry's demo and was going crazy over it, all of a sudden, Russ Reagan changed his mind and decided he wanted to sign Barry to 20th Century Records. And on March 27th, 1973, he released his debut solo album titled I Got So Much to Give, which hit #1 on the R&B albums chart and hit number 16 on the Billboard 200 and went certified platinum. The single called I'm Gonna Love You Just a Little More, Baby hit #1 on the US R&B charts for 2 weeks and hit #3 on the Billboard Pop Singles chart and was certified gold. Now, when that album came out, that's when everybody started saying, oh, Barry sounds too much like Isaac Hayes and all this stuff. But, Barry said he didn't mind the comparison because they became real good friends in life anyway. But then right after that same year, in the summer of July 1973, his female group Love Unlimited released their second album titled Under the Influence Of, which hit #3 in the US Billboard R&B charts and hit #1 in Canada on the RPM National Albums chart. Then that same year, we're still in that same year, 1973, Barry released his second album titled Stone Gone, which hit #1 on the R&B charts and was certified gold. And the single Never Never Gonna Give You Up, man, that's my song, that hit #2 on the R&B charts and #7 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. I think that's my favorite Barry White song of all time. I can play that song back to back over and over and over, man, and never get tired of hearing that song. Never, never Gonna Give You Up. Lisa, what's her name? Lisa Stansfield remade it in 1997, and it went #1 on the Hot Dance Clubs charts. But we'll get to that. We'll get to Lisa Stansfield and Barry later. Now, in January 1974, Barry put a 40-piece string Latin orchestra together called the Love Unlimited Orchestra and released an instrumental album called Raspy and White, which ended up going platinum. The single Love's Theme, which was the instrumental version from his girl group Love Unlimited's album, that song ended up hitting #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became a disco classic on the dance floors. The funny thing about that instrumental album, the label told him that it would never work, and they didn't understand why he was putting out an instrumental album. But once again, he proved them wrong. Once again. Now, right after that, he released the theme song to the Together Brothers movie, in which later was sampled by Quad City DJs for their 1996 hit single called Come On Ride the Train, Come On and Ride It, which went platinum. So that's where that sample came from, that Together's Brothers theme movie. Then right after that, on August 6, 1974, Barry released his third album titled Can't Get Enough, which hit #1 on the R&B albums chart and hit #1 on the Billboard 200 charts, plus hit #4 on a UK albums chart. The single, y'all know the single, Can't Get Enough of Your Love Baby, hit #1 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and Billboard R&B charts and was certified gold. He said he had wrote that song specifically for Glodine. Now, his second single titled You're the First, the Last, My Everything hit #2 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and hit #1 on the UK singles chart and went certified gold. Y'all know that song. Y'all know actor Chris Tucker was singing that song in the movie Money Talks in the beginning. That's a classic movie right there. But then Barry released the Love Unlimited Orchestra second album titled White Gold. And on that album, I love the instrumental called Satin Soul. I used to love that instrumental, man. When I was making beats, I used to make a lot of beats. I used so many samples off of that White Gold album. That White Gold album is a classic. And then he released his female group, Love Unlimited, their third album. The third album came out titled In Heat, and a single called I Belong to You hit #1 on the US R&B chart. So check this. In total, Barry White released 4 albums that year in 1974. He also did a theme version for the King Kong movie. Barry White was on fire. He was successful in everything he did. But the most important thing he did that year in 1974, he married Glodine from his female group Love Unlimited. They got married. Then he went on his first world tour that year. Money was coming in, money was flowing. He had a big house, mansions. He bought some horses and everything. And he would meet his childhood idol Muhammad Ali, and they became good friends, would hang out all the time. He met Nelson Mandela, boxer Joe Louis, the Jackson 5. Him and Michael Jackson, they became very good friends. Jermaine Jackson. Barry said he actually gave Michael Jackson the blueprint on the music business. And he became like a godfather to Michael Jackson. Michael would hang out with Barry all the time at the house, man. And Barry continued to release albums like Just Another Way to Say I Love You in 1975. In 1976, he released Let the Music Play. And he released the album title Is This What You Want? That same year in 1976. Now, in 1977, he released Barry White Sings for Someone You Love, which hit #1 on the R&B albums chart and went platinum. And the single called It's Ecstasy When You Lay Next to Me, that hit #1 for 5 weeks on the R&B singles chart and #4 on the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart and sold over 3 million copies. Wow, this man. And look, Mary J. Blige sampled it for her song called You Bring Me Joy, which hit #1 on the Hot Dance Club Songs charts from her album, the 1995 album called My Life, which is a classic for Mary J. In 1978, he released the album called The Man, which hit #1 on the R&B chart, selling over 1 million copies. Now, the Man album, I remember a song my mom used to play called Just the Way You Are, which is actually a cover song from singer Billy Joel just the year before, because Billy Joel had won 2 Grammy Awards for that song. But Barry did a cover of it, man. I think Barry's version is one of the greatest. That's a beautiful song right there, Just the Way You Are. Now, in 1979, he released the album called I Love to Sing the Songs I Sing. But the same year, in 1979, he ended up leaving his label, 20th Century Records, because according to Barry, it was a lack of respect they showed him. They wouldn't promote his albums the way he wanted them to. And the main thing was, new people came in to run the label. And plus his contract was up. So Barry left that label, 20th Century Records, and he started his own label called Unlimited Gold Records with CBS Columbia Records. Did a partnership with them. Also around that time, his female group, the trio Love Unlimited, they split up. They split up and went their separate ways. Dee Dee Parsons would die from cancer years later, man, at the age of only 39 years old. Wow, rest in peace to her, man. And Barry just continued to release music, man, release albums, but his sales started to decline because disco had faded out. And there was a new wave of artists on the scene like Michael Jackson, Bruce Springsteen, Luther Vandross, and many more. And in 1981, he and his wife Glodine, they released a duet album titled Barry and Glodine. In 1982, he would face some tragedy though, man. His brother Daryl was murdered. Now, the story goes with that whole thing, man. Now, see, when Daryl had got out of prison back in 1978 after doing 13 years for that kidnapping and bank robbery, Barry tried to help him. But all Daryl knew was the street life. So, you know what? Barry was like, okay. Barry just gave him money every week since he didn't want to start a business or anything. But the day Daryl was killed, the day his brother Daryl was killed, what had happened was he had got into it with one of his neighbors or something, over some money or something. The neighbor accused Daryl of not giving back all of his change. Daryl had went to the liquor store for his neighbor named Ernest Little. He gave Daryl $20 to buy liquor, beer, and cigarettes. And when Daryl came back from the store, he only had like the liquor, and he didn't give his neighbor Ernest Little his change back. And that's when they had got into it. And he ended up shooting Daryl. He shot Daryl straight in the heart. Man, he was only 37 years old, man. And Barry was so devastated, man, and hurt, because that was his best friend, his brother. So hurt after losing him, his only brother. And here we go. You know how the media was like, the media always getting it wrong. They were saying that Barry White had got murdered. They said Barry White had got murdered all over the radio. Wow. But, that same year his brother Daryl was shot and killed, their father had passed away too. Now, in 1983, Barry did an interview on a show called Black Focus. It's on YouTube, so y'all can check it out when y'all get a chance. But he did this interview on a show called Black Focus. And, he was talking about technology and music and how dangerous it is and how it was going to replace human beings. But, in his book, he stated that when he discovered MIDI, which stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, he loved it because he didn't need to have a full orchestra anymore. He didn't have to hire a bunch of people to play instruments, because with MIDI, you can do it yourself. But Barry was kicking some real deep stuff in that interview, though. That interview was very deep, y'all. Y'all can check that out on YouTube when y'all get a chance. Now, in 1984, he signed singer Chucky Booker. Who remembers Chucky Booker? He signed Chucky Booker to his label. Chucky Booker had that song, what's the song Chucky Booker? Game, #1 song called Games and Turned Away. He also wrote and produced for the group Troop the song Spread My Wings and All I Do Is Think of You, which also hit #1s. But Barry White was Chucky Booker's godfather. And Glodine and Chucky Booker's mother, they had grew up together. They was best friends. That was his connection to Barry White. Now, also that same year in 1984, Barry's good friend, the late, great Marvin Gaye, had done an interview in Billboard magazine saying that Barry White was going to produce his next album. And at the time, Barry didn't even know that he had put that out to the world. So the next thing you know, Marvin Gaye had got in contact with Barry when he was over Don Cornelius' house. He was chilling at Don Cornelius' house, Soul Train host Don Cornelius, because Barry and Don Cornelius were best friends. So when Barry spoke to Marvin on the phone that Friday at Don Cornelius' house, they agreed to work together and get in the studio on Monday. Barry talked to Marvin Gaye on Friday. They agreed to work together and get in the studio the following Monday. But then that Sunday, on April Fool's Day, Marvin Gaye was killed by his father. Wow, that's crazy. And after that, years later, Barry ended up leaving his partnership with CBS Columbia Records. And then he fell on some hard times, man, financially. Like I said, it was the 80s, and his music really wasn't selling like that. It was just a whole new wave of artists coming in. Music was changing. But, luckily, some of his good friends, they ended up loaning him some money to help him out. And he also got a new record deal with A&M Records. And on September 24th, 1987, he released an album titled The Right Night and Barry White. But then in 1988, after 15 years of marriage, Barry and his wife Glodine decided to separate. But they did not officially divorce, though. They just separated. Now, in 1989, singer Lisa Stansfield hit the scene, and she released a #1 hit song called All Around the World, in which she says was a dedication song to Barry White. And a couple years later, she re-recorded it as a duet with Barry White. Lisa Stansfield said, ever since she was a little girl, when her mother used to play music, she would just melt. And Barry White was very appreciative of her. He said she used this formula of phrasing, my chord progressions, my melody structure, my style of doubling on the harmony. He said with no sense of jealousy or resentment. He appreciated that. She's one of the students. He said she's one of the students in the Barry White School of Music. A lot of other British artists, Barry White was so big overseas, man. They grew up on this music. British artists like Soul to Soul. They said they was influenced by Barry White too. Barry was big overseas, man. One of the first artists to be big like that over there. Now, in 1990, he was featured on a song called The Secret Garden with Al B. Shore, James Ingram, and El DeBarge off the Quincy Jones Back on the Block album. Great song. Love that song still to this day, man. That song hit #1 on the Billboard R&B chart for a week. And when he did that song, when he got that call from Quincy, right, that was really his comeback. His voice on that track gained him it just gained him a lot of new followers. A lot of new young fans started getting hip to him, and Barry started to adapt to the young culture. And that's when he started wearing that ponytail. Now, on October 8th, 1991, he released the album titled Put Me in Your Mix, which hit number 96 on the Billboard 200 and number 8 on the Billboard Top R&B Albums chart. The single, Put Me in Your Mix, that hit #2. It hit #2 on the Billboard R&B Singles chart. Now, he also did a duet on that album with singer Isaac Hayes. I told you him and Isaac Hayes became real good friends, even though he was trying to compare them in the beginning. But they had did a song called Dark and Lovely, You Over There, on that album. Now, on April 29th, 1993, Barry's voice appeared on The Simpsons for the episode called Whacking Day. And I remember that too, watching that episode. That was the 20th episode for the 4th season and was the highest rated show from the Fox network that week. And then he appeared on The Simpsons again on episode 22 called Krusty Gets Canceled. That same year, in 1993, his mother had passed away. She died from Alzheimer's disease. Now, on October 4th, 1994, he released the album titled The Icon Is Love, which hit #1 on the Billboard R&B album charts and went certified double platinum. The man was back. He was nominated for a Grammy for the best R&B album, but he lost that to TLC's Crazy Sexy Cool album. That was a crazy album too. But he did win the Soul Train Music Award for Best R&B Soul Album, Male. Now, here we go. The single, Practice What You Preach. Man, what a song. Great song. Now, that song went certified gold and was written by the late, great Gerald Levert. Written by Gerald Levert, y'all. And it gave Barry his first #1 on the Billboard R&B singles chart in almost 20 years. Wow. The last time he had a hit record on the song was in 1977. And you know what's crazy? People was hating too. You know, Gerald Levert said a lot of people in the music business dogged him when he told them that he had written songs for Barry White. He said some people in the industry was telling him, why would you give Barry White tracks? He's too old. Wow. Now you see what happened. The man was back. But Practice What You Preach, written by Gerald Levert, great song. Was my junk right there. Still listen to it today. To this day, man, still listening to that song. That was the jam. You know, the crazy part is that whole album, right? That whole Icon Is Love album, his label A&M Records at the time really didn't believe in that album. They didn't like it. They didn't like the album when he turned it into them. Wow, that's crazy. But anyway, so 1995, the next year, Barry was admitted to the hospital after suffering from hypertension. It was the start of many health problems he would face because, you know, Barry was a big boy, man. 6'4", almost weighing close to 400 pounds. But, you know, his eating habits were bad because you have to remember when he was making all that money back in the day, he could have anything he wanted. He was eating at the best restaurants, staying in 5-star hotels. They say he would order so much food that his dinner bill would be $1,500 to $2,000 a night. And his room would look like a buffet was in there or something. Seafood, sweets, cake, fried chicken. He loved everything fried, name it. Now, one thing he didn't do, he didn't drink alcohol. He drank a lot of water though. He didn't drink no alcohol. He always drank a lot of water. But they say he smoked. He was a very heavy smoker though. He smoked cigarettes. Very heavy smoker. Some say he smoked 3 packs a day. Some say 150 cigarettes a day, which is roughly between 7 to 8 packs of cigarettes a day. Wow. And another thing, he hated doctors. You know how them old school people are. They ain't going to no doctor, man. You know, a lot of the older people hated going to the doctor. They had put him on some high blood pressure pills for his hypertension and high blood, but he never took them. Now, in 1996, him and actor Chris Rock did a cover of Cheech and Chong's 1973 song called Basketball Jones for the Space Jam soundtrack. That same year, in 96, he did a duet with Tina Turner called In Your Wildest Dreams for her ninth studio album called Wildest Dreams. In 1998, he was admitted to the hospital after suffering from hypertension and high blood pressure again. Then he signed a new deal with a label called Private Music because when he was getting sick with all the high blood pressure, it was hard for him kind of to get a new record deal after having a hit album with The Icon Is Love. But a lot of labels didn't want to sign him because of his health. But Private Music, that label signed him. And on July 27th, 1999, he released his final album titled Stay in Power, which ended up going certified gold. And the single called Stay in Power hit number 45 on the Billboard R&B charts and won him his first 2 Grammys, y'all. All them albums back in the 70s, he was doing them hits, millions going platinum. He never won a Grammy back in those days in the 70s. So this Stay in Power album, 1999, gave him his first 2 Grammy Awards. He won one for Best Male R&B Vocal Performance and Best Traditional R&B Vocal Performance. Wow, that's when he first got his Grammy in '99. Now, the following month, right, in August that 1999, he was on the tour with the legendary R&B group Earth, Wind and Fire. And he had to get off the tour because it was Barry's world tour. But he had to get off the tour, because of his health. He was dealing with exhaustion and high blood pressure. That still in that same year, '99, he released his autobiography, the book titled Love Unlimited, written by Mark Elliott, which is a great book, y'all. I recommend y'all to check that out. He gets very detailed and personal in that book. Now, in the year 2000, he did a concert in Sydney, Australia, in front of 4,000 fans, and they started booing him. They booed Barry White because he was sitting down the whole show, and they were unable to really see him. Some of the crowd could only see his back because he couldn't really move or turn around like that. He was sitting in a chair. But what the fans at that show didn't know was Barry was sick, man, and in a lot of pain, might I add. He was in a lot of pain and sick that show. But look, he still went out there and he wanted to give them a show because that's just who he is. And, he was unable to stand up and move around while singing because he was suffering from edema. Now, edema, edema is something that causes swelling of the body tissue due to trapped excess fluid. His legs and ankles were swollen real bad. But Barry, Barry still came out there. Like I said, he came out there and, they booed him and half of the audience walked out early angry, which led to the promoters offering refunds to fans. Now, in 2001, he made 3 guest appearances on the comedy drama television series Ally McBeal. In May 2003, while undergoing dialysis and awaiting a kidney transplant, Barry suffered a severe stroke, which affected his speech and the right side of his body. But his family said he was expected to recover, but he didn't. He never recovered fully, and he had to retire from the public. Then his health just got worse, man. Then he started having seizures. Now, some of his family members were saying that Barry's health got worse because there was a lot of fighting going on between his girlfriend of 9 years named Catherine Denton and his family members over who was going to sign the papers and make health decisions for Barry, which really was stressing him out. They said all the fighting and the fighting and fussing, you stressing him out, and he just kept getting worse and worse and stayed sick, man. So here's the crazy part. Barry had signed papers that his record company was the ones who would make that decision. So when his record company got involved, they sided with Barry's girlfriend, Catherine Denton, and once that happened, she didn't let nobody see him at all. His daughters and sons couldn't even visit him then. Wow. That's crazy. But, and on July 4th, Independence Day, y'all, July 4th, 2003, Barry White died at the hospital, 9:30 a.m. from cardiac arrest and of a stroke brought on by the high blood pressure and kidney failure. At the time he weighed 364 pounds, man. And it's just sad because he was waiting for a kidney transplant. But the doctors couldn't do it because he had to get his health and his strength back first. And his sister said doctors told him like giving him a kidney at that point was like giving a dead man a new kidney. Wow. That's crazy, man. Now, right after he died months later, his girlfriend, Catherine Denton, claimed her infant daughter was his biological child. And she also filed a claim against his estate saying Barry said she'll be taken care of for life and promised her a $2 million house in a gated Los Angeles community. But when she did the paternity test, Now here's the crazy part. His girlfriend, Catherine Denton, of 9 years, she did a paternity test and revealed that that Barry was not the father of her child. Wow, that's crazy. Now, on September 20th, 2004, he was inducted into the Dance Music Hall of Fame in New York. Now, here's something that was crazy to me. This is something crazy right here. I said it earlier. In 2009, an aquarium in London used Barry White's music to encourage their sharks to mate. Apparently, his music makes sharks horny. Wow, that's crazy. Now, on September 12th, 2013, which would that day would have been Barry's birthday, 69th birthday. He got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In 2016, his daughter Denise White sued his $20 million estate, which is controlled by his wife Glodine, because they never divorced. They never divorced legally. They just separated back in 1988. Now, see, Barry had a daughter named Denise White. Denise White was a secret daughter he had back in 1962 when he was a teenager. And she didn't meet Barry until 1988. And she said she was receiving funds, but then all of a sudden, she stopped receiving funds. Then in 2017, Barry's son, Daryl White, named after his brother, and from Barry's first marriage, he sued his estate, claiming he was cut off financially. Now, according to TMZ, he sued his stepmother, Glodine White, after realizing he wasn't getting the promised amount of money that his father allegedly left in his will. He said that he never got to look at the papers to the will, and Glodine just asked him to trust her. He said he did receive payments until September 2015 and decided to sue Glodine, claiming that she was making use of his money to fund her lavish lifestyle. Wow, so I hope they got all that straight now, man. Barry's, it always happens, man. Happens with a lot of families. When somebody dies and the estate got it and everybody's, I don't know, man. You know how it go. But Daryl White, though, he also sings and have a deep baritone voice just like his father Barry too, man. He got a video out on YouTube, Daryl White. Check him out. But like I said earlier, y'all make sure y'all check out his book called Love Unlimited. Great book. I recommend y'all getting that and supporting that. And I know there's got to be a biopic in the works. There's got to be a Barry White movie in the works. Who do y'all think can play Barry White in the movie? I'd love to hear y'all comments on that. Leave y'all answers in the comments, though. But Barry White was 58 years old. 58. Rest in peace. The legend, the maestro, Mr. Barry White.